I always thought marriage was just a game, and the one who had the most secrets won. I had the perfect husband. Brian was successful, handsome, attentive. Too attentive. Our friends envied us, thinking we were the perfect couple. But I always wanted more. I missed the fire, the adrenaline, the feeling that I was breaking the rules and could be punished. That's why I started playing my own game. When Brian was away on business, I would wear a red dress, go out to nightclubs, let strangers buy me cocktails. Sometimes it was a casual encounter, sometimes it was a long-term relationship. But most of all, I loved it. I was sure Brian would never find out. I knew how to cover my tracks. No passwords on my phone, no browser history, no compromising messages. Every lie I told was polished to perfection. One day, after a night out with someone else, I found Brian in the kitchen. He was standing by the coffee maker, slowly stirring his cup with a spoon. "Hi," I said, feeling my heart pounding wildly in my chest. "Hi." His voice was calm, but something about him was wrong. I looked at the man carefully. His smile was familiar, his movements relaxed. But something had changed in his eyes. A sense of foreboding shot through me. What if he knew something? But that was impossible. I was covering my tracks perfectly. I forced a smile and walked over to him, touching his hand gently. "Miss me?" Brian smiled back. "I would." He leaned down and kissed me on the lips. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't kissing me with love, but with an awareness of something I didn't know. This was just the beginning. I didn't know yet that my game had already become his game. I tried to convince myself that everything was the same as always, that Brian just missed me, that I was making things up. But something about his gaze bothered me. For the next few days, I acted as if nothing had happened. I was the perfect wife, gentle, caring, smiling. I cooked his favorite dishes, asked him about his activities, listened to his stories about work. But the adrenaline was still pumping inside me. A week passed, and I felt that irresistible urge to take risks again. That evening, Brian was working late. I couldn't help myself. I grabbed my phone and quickly typed a message. "I want to meet. Now." 5 minutes later, the answer came. Golden Crown Hotel. Room 312. I'm waiting. My heart raced. I put on my favorite black dress that perfectly accentuated my figure, painted my lips with red lipstick, and put on high heels. One last look in the mirror, perfection. I took my car keys and quietly left the house. I was filled with excitement on the way to the hotel. I liked the risk. I liked knowing I was playing with fire. When I entered the room, the man who was waiting for me was already sitting on the bed. His name was Nick. Tall, with brown eyes, an athletic body. We had met several times before, and I knew he wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. "You look especially beautiful today," he said, looking at me with a hungry gleam in his eyes. I smiled and threw my purse on the table. I know. At that moment, I didn't know that this night would change everything. That I had already fallen into a trap that I hadn't noticed. Because when I got home, I was in for a surprise. Brian was sitting in the living room. The lights were dim, a glass of whiskey on the table. "Where have you been?" His voice was calm. But something in his gaze sent a chill down my spine. I smiled as I always do. At a restaurant with a friend. Brian took a slow sip and set the glass down on the table. "Really? Really?" My heart was pounding. He didn't take his eyes off me. And then, without changing his expression, he took out his phone and turned on the video. I saw myself on the screen. Myself, entering room 312 of the Golden Crown Hotel. My blood froze in my veins. Brian leaned back on the sofa, looking at me as if waiting for what I would say next. "So, honey, will you tell me again who you were with tonight?" My heart felt like it had stopped. He knows. And this is just the beginning of his game. My heart was beating, so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I stared at the screen of my phone, at that damn video, and I couldn't believe it. How? How did he film that? How did he know where I was going? I looked up at Brian. He was sitting there calmly, as if this were just a normal conversation after dinner. "What, honey?" His voice was quiet, but every word pierced me like a knife. It's not what you think," I breathed, trying to find some kind of connection. "Really?" He raised his eyebrows. "Then explain what I think." I knew I had to come up with something immediately. It was a coincidence. I met someone I knew there. We had coffee and in a hotel room. His tone remained calm, but I could see his fingers clenching around the glass. It's not that. What a pity, Brian sighed, interrupting me. I thought you were going to tell me the truth. I clenched my fists. The truth. I knew that if I confessed, it would be the end. But he already knew. He had seen everything. All I could do was, I fell to my knees in front of him, grabbing his hand. Brian, I made a mistake. For the first time in my life, I felt truly afraid. A mistake. He tilted his head, looking at me. Do you think it was just a mistake? I nodded, squeezing his hand tighter. It didn't mean anything. I only love you. His eyes remained cold. And how many times have you loved me when you were with other people? I felt like someone had poured ice water on me. He knows better. I parted my lips, but I didn't know what to say. Brian smiled. That's good. Now you're quiet. I felt myself shaking. What do you want to do? He took a sip of whiskey, becoming completely calm again. Oh, don't worry, honey. I'm not going to make a fuss over you. I blinked. Then, I just want you to feel the same way. I froze. He stood up, putting his glass down on the table, and walked over to me. He leaned down, touching my chin with his fingers, forcing me to look him in the eye. You know what the worst thing about betrayal is? I was silent. He leaned closer, his lips barely touching my ear. That you never know what's real anymore and what's a game. I flinched, looking at him. What does he mean? He turned and walked toward the stairs. Good night, honey. I stood there, panting. Brian didn't ask me anything anymore. He didn't throw tantrums. He didn't scream. But that was what scared me the most. What was he up to? The next morning I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. My sleep was intermittent, and every time I closed my eyes, Brian would appear before me again. His calm voice, his cold gaze, his words that made me shudder. I just want you to feel the same way. What did he mean? When I went downstairs, Brian was already sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. There was no trace of anger or aggression on his face. Good morning, he said without even looking up. I swallowed, trying to keep my face straight. Good morning. I sat down opposite him, hiding my trembling hands under the table. Brian, he finally put down the newspaper and looked up at me. Yes. I was in a fever. I want to talk about yesterday. His lips twitched in a slight smile. And what exactly? About the video. Oh, yes. He picked up the newspaper again. Interesting video, isn't it? I felt everything inside me tighten. You didn't scream. You didn't fight. Should you? He tilted his head. I thought you wanted to talk. Brian leaned forward, propping himself up on his elbows. Okay, let's talk, Alice. You betrayed me. And you didn't do it once, did you? My throat went dry. Yes. Okay, to be honest, he nodded. So the question is, what do I do about it now? I felt like screaming. What kind of game is this? Why is he acting like it doesn't matter? Brian, can you just say what you want to do? His smile widened. Why should I do anything? I stared at him, not believing my ears. Will you just forgive me? I didn't say that. Then what? He ran his fingers thoughtfully along the rim of his cup. I want to offer you a game. A chill ran through me. What other game? Brian leaned closer. I won't tell you when, how, or with whom. But I will do the same thing you did. My legs gave out. What? Now you won't be able to trust either. His voice was quiet, but every word hit like a hammer. Now you'll be wondering whether it's a lie or the truth. I felt myself shake. You're kidding. No. My brain refused to accept it. He wants me to feel what he felt. Brian leaned back in his chair, as if this conversation was amusing to him. Oh, one more condition. I could barely get out. What? You can't stop me. My heart was pounding in my chest. And what if I say no? His smile disappeared. Then I'll destroy you. I clenched my fists. You want me to live in fear? I want you to finally understand what real horror is. I stood up from the table, my chair almost falling over from the sudden movement. This is madness. Brian raised his eyebrows. Why? You liked living without rules. I turned and ran out of the room. But his words were already deep in my brain. I can't trust him. I can't sleep well. I can't know if he's telling the truth. And that was the scariest thing of all. The next few days were a nightmare for me. Brian acted as if nothing had happened. He was friendly, caring, even gentle. But in every movement, every look, every word, there was a hidden game. And the worst thing was that I didn't know when he would strike. I tried to live my life as before, but every time his phone rang, everything inside me tightened. What if it was her? I started following him. I secretly checked his things, his phone, his watch. But nothing. No traces. And that's what scared me even more. One evening I couldn't stand it again. Brian was sitting in the living room, reading something on his phone. I went over and leaned over him. "Who are you texting?" He looked up at me and smiled slowly. "What, I wonder?" My throat went dry. "Is that her?" He put the phone down and took a sip of whiskey. "Who?" "Don't pretend." I felt myself starting to lose control. "Is that your lover?" Brian looked at me thoughtfully. "What do you think?" I felt panic rising in me. "Brian, that's enough." He sighed and set the glass down on the table. "You don't like this game." "It's not a game," I screamed. He leaned closer. "But you liked the adrenaline, didn't you?" I gasped with anger. "You want to destroy me?" His smile grew even wider. "I want you to understand what it means to be deceived." I took a step back. "That's wrong. That's fair." I balled my hands into fists. "I'm not playing this." Brian nodded. "Then you can leave." I froze. "What?" He raised his eyebrows. "If you don't like it, pack your things and go." I felt my fingers tremble. I couldn't leave. If I leave, I'll admit that he's won. I took a deep breath and whispered, "I'll stay." Brian smiled. "Okay." But as I walked upstairs, I couldn't help but feel like I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I would be ready for his game. But Brian turned out to be much more dangerous than I expected. The next morning, everything was as usual. He made me coffee, kissed me before work, and remained as calm and relaxed as ever. But I couldn't trust him anymore. Every move he made seemed suspicious to me. I checked his phone while he was taking a shower. Nothing. No messages. No calls. Nothing compromising. He had erased his tracks. Or he hadn't started the game. I had been walking around like a man on pins and needles all day. And then the first shock came. That evening, Brian came home a little later than usual. "Late at work." My voice sounded cautious. He took off his jacket and threw it on the couch. "Yes." "Really?" Brian looked at me, and I saw a familiar glint in his eyes. He knew I was scared, and he liked it. "What do you think?" he asked. I felt anger welling up inside me. "I think you're making me doubt myself." Brian smiled. "Maybe." I stepped closer. "Is that her?" His gaze was cold. "Who?" "Your lover," my lips barely managed to say. He didn't answer. He just walked over to me, leaned in my ear, and whispered, "Do you really want to know?" I flinched. "What are you up to?" He didn't say anything. He just quietly walked into the bedroom, leaving me in a panic. I no longer knew what was real and what was a game. And the worst was yet to come. The next day I received an anonymous message. It had only one sentence. "You have no idea who she is." My hands went cold. He was playing with me, and I was starting to lose control. I couldn't think of anything else. The anonymous message burned in my mind. "You have no idea who she is." I didn't know if it was Brian or someone else, but the feeling of the threads disappearing from my hands was becoming unbearable. I began to tear apart from the inside. Before, I felt in control, adrenaline, excitement for what I was doing. And now I was a victim. I sat in the car, clutching my phone, and reread that damn message. Who was she? My heart was pounding. A friend? A colleague? A new acquaintance? Someone I had seen but hadn't paid attention to? I began to analyze every woman in his environment. That evening, when Brian got home, I waited for him. "How was your day?" He was completely calm, as if nothing had happened. "It's normal." I tried to control my voice. But I noticed the smell. A subtle, barely perceptible feminine perfume. "What did you do after work?" I said it too quickly. He held his gaze on me. "What do you think?" I clenched my fists. "Who is she?" His smile was light, barely perceptible. "I thought you already knew." I was thrown into a heat. Are you kidding? He put the keys on the table and walked past me into the kitchen. I warned you, I won't tell you when or how. I felt panic coming over me. What if it had already happened? I stood in the middle of the room, one question pounding in my head. Had he already cheated on me? Is he just making me think he cheated? My legs were shaking. I couldn't tell the truth from the lies anymore. And that could only mean one thing. His game was working. I couldn't calm down. Every movement Brian made, every look he gave me seemed like a hint that she was somewhere nearby. His mistress. But who? I began to look closely at all the women in his life. My first suspicion fell on Mia, his secretary. She was always a little too friendly. Her smile when she saw me seemed fake. I arrived at Brian's office under the guise of bringing him lunch. "Oh, Mr. Williams just left for a meeting," Mia said with the same polite smile. "Do you know where?" She tilted her head slightly. "Yes, but I'm not sure I can divulge that information." My fingers tightened around the bag of food. She definitely knows something. "Tell me the truth," I said, moving closer to her. "Is that you?" Mia didn't even seem surprised. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, but I don't understand what you're talking about." "You do." Her smile widened. "If you have any questions, it's best to ask your husband." I gritted my teeth. Is she making fun of me? I ran out of the office, feeling like I was going to explode. What if it wasn't her? I began to suspect Emma, my friend. She had always been supportive of me, but lately she had started to avoid talking about Brian. And then there was Nicole, his coworker, who asked me too many questions about our marriage. I couldn't trust anyone. That evening I met Brian at home again. He was sitting on the couch, drinking whiskey, looking at me with the same smile. "Having a rough day?" I clenched my fists. "Who is she? Have you guessed yet?" I stepped closer. "Brian, if you want to break me..." He laughed. "Oh, honey, I already did." I froze. "What?" He raised his glass, looking at me over the glass. "Look at yourself. You're out of control." I felt fear flood through me. He's right. I'm out of control of myself or my life. But I had to know the truth, because the worst thing would be if his mistress was someone I never would have suspected. I woke up to the sharp sound of a text message. The clock read 7:12 a.m. I picked up my phone, my blood running cold. Anonymous number. If you were such a good wife, why did he find someone better? I sat up in bed, feeling a cold sweat break out. What was this? A joke? Manipulation? I immediately suspected Brian, but when I opened my social media, I realized that everything was much worse. My Instagram, Facebook, and even my work profile were filled with comments and messages. "You're a hypocrite. Cheating and playing the victim? Bravo. You must have liked it when he found someone younger. Now you'll understand what it means to be betrayed." I opened my message, and there was a video. My own video. A montage of me hugging men, leaving a hotel, kissing someone in a club. Who did it? I ran out of the bedroom and rushed to Brian, who was calmly drinking coffee in the kitchen. "Is that you?" My voice trembled. He didn't even look up. What did I do this time? I pushed the phone in front of him. "This." He slowly scrolled through the video and raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I wonder. Who could have done this?" "Don't play with me," I screamed. Brian smiled and finally looked at me. "How does it feel to have your life falling apart right before your eyes?" I was thrown into a frenzy. Is this your revenge?" He raised his cup to his lips. "This isn't even the beginning." I stood before him, realizing that everything was spinning out of control. If he could destroy me in public, what else could he do? After the video was leaked online, my world began to fall apart. I worked at an advertising agency, and in our industry, reputation is everything. When I got to the office, all the conversation had stopped. My colleagues looked away, and some even smiled with sympathy or glee. I couldn't let them see that I was affected. I sat down on my computer and opened my email. Inbox, 32 new messages. Outbox, 5 canceled appointments. Clients refused to work with me. I opened a chat with my manager, and at that moment the door to the office opened. "Alice, come over." My heart pounded. I entered the office and saw my boss looking at me over the top of his glasses. "What's going on?" I tried to sound confident. He sighed and turned the monitor toward me. The news on the main page of a blog about the business elite. Scandal. Top lawyer's wife leads a double life. Betrayals. Lavish meetings and high-profile scandals exposed. I gritted my teeth. I don't want to know if it's true, he interrupted me. But do you understand how this affects the company's reputation? I nodded, clenching my fingers into fists. We have to take a break. I felt a chill run down my spine. Are you firing me? He held his breath. Let's call it a temporary leave. My lips trembled. But it's not my fault. It doesn't matter, he said firmly. I left the office, barely holding back tears. Brian had taken my job away. I realized that he was in control now. And that wasn't even the worst of it. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at my phone. My contacts were filling up with people I considered friends. But now I wasn't sure if there was even one left I could trust. I dialed Emma's number, the friend who had always been there for me. Hello. Her voice was reserved. Emma, have you seen the news? She sighed. Yes, I have. You know it's all. Alice, I don't know what to think. I felt like I was being electrocuted. What? I'm sorry, but I can't associate myself with this scandal right now. Are you serious? My voice trembled. I have my own reputation, and this is too much. We're friends. Emma was silent for a few seconds, then exhaled. There were beeps. She hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. One by one they disappeared. I opened the group chat where we were texting our mutual friends. The last message was from someone else. I always knew something was wrong with her. Poor Brian. They were all on his side. He had done it. He had turned them against me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying not to scream. Now I had no job, no friends. And worst of all, I still didn't know who his mistress was. But I had a feeling I would find out soon. I sat in the dark living room, clutching a glass of water. My hands were shaking. Brian had taken everything from me, my reputation, my job, my friends. And worst of all, I didn't know what would happen next. Who was she? I no longer doubted that he was with someone. He could have just made me jealous by dropping hints. But his pleasure was too real. I had to find her. I opened his laptop. The password. I typed in our wedding date. Wrong. I tried his birthday. No. Damn. Then I tried trust. That word was important to him. Click. Login granted. My fingers quickly began to scroll through my email. There were many work emails, but among them, there was one that immediately caught my eye. Sender anonymous. Subject. I miss you. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. You promised she'd be gone soon. I don't want to hide anymore. I kept reading, and I started to shake. I can't pretend we're just friends. I want to be there. I want her to know the truth. I swallowed hard. There was no signature, but it was sent from our company's corporate domain. I opened the employee list. There were only 5 women on it, and one of them was my friend. My heart sank. It was her. His mistress was someone I trusted. I exhaled, trying not to smash my laptop. He wanted me to find out this way. He wanted it to be the most painful blow. I lifted my head, and at that moment the living room door opened. Brian entered, looking at me with the same cold smile. Well, honey, he tilted his head. Do you already know? I didn't answer. I just stared at him. For the first time, not with anger, not with confusion, but with hatred. I sat in the dark, gripping the arm of the chair so tightly that my nails dug into the fabric. Brian stood across from me, his smile cold, confident. You know who she is, right? I was silent. Oh, you don't have to be so reserved. He tilted his head. Say it out loud. I took a deep breath. It's Emma, right? He raised an eyebrow as if surprised. Finally, my heart was pounding, so hard I thought I was going to faint. Emma, my best friend, the person I trusted the most. How long? I whispered. Brian tilted his head. What exactly? How long have we known each other? Or, how long have you been living in an illusion? My breathing became labored. Answer. He took a step closer. Rick! It burned me. Rick! He nodded, completely calm. Even longer, to be honest. But it was a year ago that we decided this was serious. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She knew. About your infidelities? He smiled. Of course. I covered my mouth with my hand. Emma knew, and she didn't tell me, because she was his mistress. I raised my head, and my gaze met his. You did it on purpose. Of course. To break me. To make you feel what real pain is. He leaned toward me. His lips were a few inches from mine. You learned to play games, honey. But I was born for this. I was choking with anger. But he wasn't done yet. Brian picked up his phone and tapped something. I got a message. I looked at the screen. A video. With trembling hands, I opened it and saw him and Emma together. Not hidden, not veiled. She was kissing him. He was answering. In the video, they were in our house. I was shaking. I looked up at him. He just smiled. How are you, honey? Now do you understand what it's like to see the truth? My fingers clenched into fists. This time I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just stared at him. And in that moment I realized, I won't lose. I'll make him regret everything. I couldn't breathe. The videos were still flashing on my phone screen, but I couldn't see them anymore. All I could see was a smile. Brian was watching me with satisfaction, like an artist who had just finished his masterpiece. So, honey, did you like the show? I put the phone down, trying to hide the trembling in my hands. Did you just do it for revenge? He tilted his head. Revenge? No, it's justice. I laughed. Bitterly, sharply, like a madman. Do you think that after all this, I'm just going to fall to my knees and beg you to forgive me? His smile didn't change. No, honey, I think you belong to me now. The words sent a chill through me. What? Brian slowly sat on the arm of the chair, his gaze piercing. You've lost everything. Your job, your friends, your reputation. He raised a finger. And I'm still here. I clenched my fists. You can't control me. He smiled wider. And you try to leave. I jumped to my feet. Okay. I left the living room, almost running for the stairs. His voice caught up with me as I was near the bedroom door. Do you think anyone will help you? I froze, not turning around. Try it. Will you go to the police? They only know one side of a story, mine. My fingers tightened on the doorknob. Will you go to your friends? Brian sighed. Oh, right. You don't have them anymore. I closed my eyes. Maybe you want a new job? Oh, I forgot to mention. I made sure no one hired you. My body froze. And the most interesting thing. Are you going to your lover's? But he was the one who recorded your meetings for me. My stomach clenched. I slowly turned around. What? Brian tilted his head. Oh, you thought I just accidentally got these videos? My lips went dry. He worked for you. Brian smiled even wider. Every move you make. At that moment, I understood the truth. This wasn't a game. This was a trap. And I was in the middle of it. But he was wrong about one thing. I wasn't his puppet anymore. I would find a way to escape. And I'll do it, so that he doesn't even have time to realize how he lost. I sat in the dark of my bedroom, trying to gather my thoughts. Brian was much smarter than I thought. He wasn't just getting revenge. He had ruined my life, and then offered the only way out, to stay by my side. Controlling me. Every step I took. Every word I said. Every attempt to escape. I had nothing left. My friends were gone. My job was ruined. My lover had turned out to be a traitor. And all of this was at his hands. I began to realize how much I had underestimated him. But the worst was yet to come. The next day I went into the kitchen and froze. Brian was sitting at the table, leafing through the newspaper. And next to him was Emma. My heart stopped. What is she doing here? I felt my hands clench into fists. Emma lifted her head, her lips curling into a familiar fake smile. Oh, Alice, you finally come down. We were starting to think you were ignoring us. I barely restrained myself from pouncing on her right there. What are you doing here? Every word came out through my teeth. Brian put down the newspaper and calmly took a sip of his coffee. We're just talking. Talking. I almost choked with rage. Don't be so tense, Emma smiled. After all, we're all together now. I felt my head spinning. You're kidding. Brian calmly stood up and walked over to me. You thought this was all punishment? I clenched my fists even tighter. What is it then? He leaned closer, his lips barely touching my ear. This is the new order. I flinched. What are you? You have no choice, Alice. His voice was quiet, but it held an unwavering conviction. Either you stay here, or you disappear. I felt panic seize my body. He had me trapped. But at the same moment, something inside me snapped. I won't let him win. I will break free. I will find a way. And I will destroy him, just as he destroyed me. I no longer lived in my own house. I survived in it. Brian and Emma acted as if I were a guest in their lives. They ate breakfast together. They laughed together. They made plans for the future together. And I was a shadow. Every day I became more and more isolated. Maybe you should go for some fresh air, Emma once said, playfully stirring her coffee. I gritted my teeth. Maybe you should just get out of my house. She laughed, not even trying to hide her mockery. Oh, Alice, this hasn't been your house for a long time. Brian stared at me silently, his gaze calm and cold. He was enjoying every minute of it. One day I decided to test whether he really was in control. I left the house without saying anything. I just got in the car and drove. For an hour. For two. I just drove forward, without a plan, without direction. And when I got back, he was waiting for me in the living room. Have a nice walk? I clenched my fingers on my keys. Were you following me? He shrugged. It's part of the rules. I felt anger well up in my chest. I'm not your property. His smile faded. Are you sure? I froze. What do you mean? Brian picked up his phone and tapped something on the screen. A second later, my own phone vibrated. A new email. I opened it and gasped. If she leaves, dump everything. Sender, Brian Williams. Recipient, anonymous. I stared at him, not understanding. What is this? Backup. He folded his arms. This is... If you decide to leave, his voice was calm, almost gentle, more videos will be posted online. I started to shake. What? Not just your betrayals, honey. His eyes narrowed. That's it. My legs buckled. You want to destroy me? He leaned closer. No. Then what? I want you to stay. I couldn't breathe anymore. My thoughts were confused, and my body refused to move. I was trapped, and if I don't find a way out, I'll just go crazy. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. I was trapped. Brian had destroyed my reputation, isolated me from my friends, and made me lose my job. And now he was keeping me here, monitoring my every move. But he had made a mistake. He thought I would give in, that I would break. But I wasn't going to. I would break out. I didn't know how, but I knew I only had one chance. I started to plan. First, how would I escape? Brian was watching me. Cameras in the house. Trackers on my phone. But I knew every device could be hacked. I went into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and quickly opened my phone. VPN. Fake location. I entered the coordinates of another city. If he checks my phone, he'll think I've gone to a completely different place than I really am. Number 2. How do I avoid blackmail? He threatened to release the video, but he won't do it if he's in danger himself. I hacked his email the night I found out about Emma. There was a lot of interesting stuff in there. Financial fraud, corruption, legal manipulation. If I disappear, these files will end up in the hands of the police. I saved them to a flash drive. Now I had a backup plan. Number 3, when? I was waiting for the perfect moment. He wouldn't leave me alone, but he was going to fly away on business next week. Then I'd run away. I could already imagine myself driving away from this hell. But I didn't know the most important thing yet. He was also getting ready. I waited for the moment when I could disappear. Brian was cautious, but I knew that even the best manipulators have weaknesses. And he had his too. He believed he had me under control. He thought he had me broken. That I was so afraid of him that I would never dare to run away. But I had learned to play his game. I became submissive. I laughed at his jokes. I pretended to accept the new rules. I even let him think that everything was back to normal between us. You're smarter, honey, he said one evening, touching my chin. I forced myself to smile. I just realized you're stronger. His eyes narrowed with pleasure. He believed me. But most importantly, I finally realized that I could break him. His weakness wasn't money. It wasn't even his reputation. His weakness was that he couldn't stand losing. I had to make him lose. My chance came when he went on a business trip. He thought I would stay home. But as soon as he flew out, I took the flash drive with his secrets, his documents, and left home. I drove fast, not stopping until I reached another city. And then I took the first step in the endgame. I sent him a video, his own video, a recording of him talking about his plan to destroy me. I heard the phone ring. His voice was cold. "What are you doing?" I smiled, although he couldn't see it. "Something you didn't expect." Now I was in control of the game. The phone in my hand was cold, and Brian was silent on the other end. For the first time in a long time, he was out of control. "This is a bad idea, Alice," he finally spoke. "No, Brian." I clenched the flash drive in my hand. "This is the best idea." He exhaled hoarsely. "What do you want?" Now he was asking me. I savored the moment. "You thought I was defenseless, that I was broken. But you were wrong. You won't win." His voice was strained. "I already won." I opened my laptop and pressed a button. Brian got a second message. Documents. All his financial machinations. Secret deals, blackmail, corruption. If this information got to the police, he would lose everything. "You won't do it." His voice no longer sounded so confident. "I already did." I heard him sigh on the other end of the line. "You'll ruin yourself too. But you'll ruin yourself more." He understood that. I won. His final move. "What do you want?" he finally asked. I smiled. "Freedom." "And what does that mean?" "You'll disappear from my life." He didn't answer. I added, "Otherwise, tomorrow everyone will find out who you really are." His silence was long, but I knew I had won. The end of the game. The next morning I received the last message from him. "I'm leaving, but we'll meet again." It sounded like a threat, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I won this game. I sat on the balcony, breathing in the fresh air. The world no longer felt like a prison cell. Brian was gone. After our conversation, he never tried to contact me again. I changed my phone number, my address, even my social media name. I started a new life. But sometimes, when I fell asleep, I had a strange feeling, as if the game wasn't over yet. A month passed. I received a message. The number was hidden. The text consisted of just one sentence. "Did you think it would be that easy?" My heart stopped. I looked around the room. Windows, doors, dark corners. Is he here? I ran outside, my heart pounding. But it was quiet. Too quiet. I won. But am I really free? The end.
Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.